Series 2, Episode 18, the season finale or series finale. It's me and Clara, and we are stealing a concept from a channel called First We Feast and a show called Hot Ones. Clara, would you like to explain what we're doing today?
So Hot Ones is a YouTube channel where celebrities of various types are interviewed whilst both the host and the guest eat increasingly spicy hot wings. And so we're going to be replicating that today. We've managed to procure the season 19 lineup of sauces.
Link in description. Mm-hmm. We will link to that in the description. So we say increasingly hot wings. This is based on the Scoville system. So what exactly is that?
So the Scoville system is a way of ranking the heat of chilies. It started out actually with people eating them in a special way, but it's now done through chromatic resonance, I think. But basically, they will distill the chili extract from the dried pepper and then use a method of ranking it. So it starts out around, a bell pepper will be about 600-700, and it goes right the way up to 16 million for pure capsaicin, which is the element of chilies that gives the heat. And I think we have a range here starting out in the thousands, going right up to one that is unranked but is rumoured to be 2 million on the Scoville scale.
So it's scary.
Yep. So, but to put it in context, jalapenos are quite tame. Then you go up through bird's eye chilies, peri-peri chilies, habaneros. By the way, apologies for any of my pronunciation if it's terrible. But habaneros, Scotch bonnet, ghost chilies, Carolina Reaper, and I think the hottest one we have on this list currently is a chili called Apollo, which is a relatively new cultivar. And that's the interesting thing, as more and more people get into heat and chilies, people are devising more and more fiendish chili pepper varieties to include in their sauces.
So for context, I've got a few here. Jalapeno at 5,000, habanero and Scotch bonnet about 300,000. All the way up to Carolina Reaper at 1.5 million. So there, yes, we've got lots of wings, lots of hot wings in front of us. What else have we got here? I've got my tequila and tonic, which I'm going to drink from now.
Yep, cheers. So, in order to beat the heat, we have got good old-fashioned water, although that does not do a lot to help with chili. You just might need the drink. It can actually make it worse. We have whole milk. And we have a variant of an Indian drink called a lassi. I will hasten to add, in Indian culture, it's not normal to drink this with heat, with hot food. They normally just drink water, but fat is one of the best things to combat heat, as is sugar. So the fat and the heat in milk and dairy products is actually quite a good subduer of heat, apparently. We'll put that to the test today, as is strong alcohol. Hence the tequila and tonic. It is medicinal and part of the experiment. I don't know.
It's not the only reason.
It probably should be a pure shot, but we'll see. If we're really struggling, maybe we'll turn to shots. It's a bit of a myth that beer helps because the alcohol isn't strong enough, and then the combination of the carbonation and the water will actually make the chili reaction worse. So we'll put to the test whether the dairy thing works, but we'll see.
Should we be having one of these other drinks, one of these milkier drinks, before we start? Or is it meant to be taken afterwards?
Honestly, I don't know the true answer to that.
Which one's this?
Okay, so this is a pineapple and lime lassi.
I like it. Okay, so what have you done with the hot wings? How did you prepare them?
So I've kept it quite simple. I found a Gordon Ramsay recipe that was inspired by his visit on hot wings. So they're just chicken wings coated in garlic powder, a bit of hot smoked paprika and a bit of paprika. I've then browned those in a pan with oil and butter and then finished them up in the air fryer to hopefully crisp them up, and then just tossed them in the recommended serving size of the sauce.
Very good. Okay, are you ready?
I think so. So Are we going to go for the first wing?
The first one, yes, so this would be easy, won't it?
So the first one is the Hot Ones, the classic chili maple edition, coming in at 1,600 Scoville units. And that's got maple syrup, tangy apple cider vinegar, and Fresno chilies. So, this is apparently the perfect balance of sweet and heat. Shall we go for it?
Yep.
Okay, we're going in. First bite.
It's tasty. It's not hot at all, though, is it?
No. Okay, so wing one down. I've got to say, it does leave a bit of a pleasant tingle on the tongue afterwards. I don't know if you feel that.
Not really.
Okay, so first question after a wing goes to Anthony. And what are you working on at the moment?
I have a manuscript that was 75% finished at the end of last year and is still 75% finished. However, I have been working on music again, so that's been good. So I've been creative in a different way. I've been writing music, recording music, and I've been working on the press. The press has been busy. That's been taking up a lot of time. 6 books so far this year. Another 3, 4, possibly 5 to come. Other than that, I've just been enjoying life. I'm pleased to have rediscovered my love for music, especially my love for punk rock. Maybe it's because I'm in my 40s now, so I'm regressing. But I think we both have. We've got a bit more back into the punk scene.
Yeah.
Going to gigs again. I mean, why have we not been doing that?
Yeah, it was really good. I suppose just being able to go recently to see NoFX perform their last gigs in the UK, which is our first gig in a very, very long time. I mean, can you think of anything else that's triggered your interest in the music, getting back into music?
Well, I stopped writing music about 10 years ago when I really focused on poetry. And then for the last few years, I've been dabbling in some experimental music, talking to Samuel Andreev a lot, trying to inspire me to get back into creating music. And I've tried out several experimental things, but I've realised I'm more comfortable when I go back to the punk stuff. And I found a way to include experimental aspects into the punk. So I've got a CD coming out in September. They're basically punk songs, but they employ palindromes in some way, because apparently everything I do has to involve palindromes in some way. I'd also say as well, it's made me realise just how much we run Penteract Press like punks. It's a punk publisher. And many people listening to this won't know that we used to run a punk rock record label 20 years ago.
Yeah. And we did everything DIY. I remember many a night cutting and gluing our own sleeves to put the CDs in and printing stickers to stick on the front of them.
Yeah, and we basically run Penteract the same way. It's got the same ethic. So are you ready for the next one?
Okay.
The first one was impressive in its taste, but it wasn't hot.
We've got 9 to go. Come on. So this one is Sinai Gourmet Tropicante, 4,000 Scoville units, so a bit hotter. Fruity Scotch bonnet peppers combined with tropical fruit like mangoes, papaya, and banana, offset with a bit of lime. So this sounds like it could be quite fruity.
I'm going to have to edit out some of the disgusting noises I make while eating hot wings.
You at least wipe your fingers rather than licking them like me.
That was very tasty. I've got to say, that was even nicer than the first one. I can tell that was slightly hotter. But it's not challenging the taste buds, is it?
Not yet.
So one of the reasons we're doing this, aside from the fact we thought it would be fun, is because Clara's main job is in the food industry. Penteract Press is just a bonus, a stressful bonus.
I think it's side hustle, I think is what they call it.
Side hustle, okay. So, Clara, would you like to describe what you do for a living?
Okay, so my current job title is Technical Quality Manager. I've worked in the food industry for a long time now, always in a field called technical. And in a nutshell, the technical department have a couple of functions. They are involved in food safety, so making sure you're not going to get food poisoning, there's no allergy problems, there's no contamination. And then quality, so you're making sure that you're always consistently getting what you expect and it's the right stuff. And then there's also areas that involve on new product development and bringing new products to market. So at the minute, I'm more involved in the quality and food safety side, although I do have a part to play in developing new products. So mainly around basically keeping everyone safe and getting the food they expect.
And you've worked in various roles over the last, 15 years?
Mm-hmm.
Different areas of the industry.
Yep.
Would you like to list them?
Well, I started out in meat, then I moved to potatoes, which doesn't sound that interesting, but they're actually surprisingly challenging because we were processing potatoes to supply other food manufacturers, and it was a great green thing because we were taking things that would have otherwise gone to waste and turning them into something good. So really, really good for the environmental impact, which is why I like that company. I then flipped into research and development. I worked in baked goods, designing cupcakes, and then gluten-free bread and other baked goods. And then for the last 4 and a bit years, I've worked for a dairy company manufacturing desserts like trifles, which for some, I know trifles aren't ubiquitous across the world, but it's a layered dessert with usually fruit and custard and cream and biscuit, but it could also have chocolate or mousse. And we also manufacture other chocolate-based desserts. There's like chocolate custards in a pot.
Okay, are we ready?
Okay, yeah, so this is wing number 3. Micro Sorcery, Pico Peppers, Pico Rico. So this is out of Montreal, Canada. It's got savoury and acidic notes from tomato and lemon with habanero heat, 15,500 Scoville Heat Units.
Okay, Canada, what have you got?
It's hotter.
Nice try, Canada.
It is hotter, but it's got kind of buffalo wing vibes.
This is easy. Are we expecting an exponential increase in heat?
Well, yeah, because the Scoville scale works on dilution factors. So when it was originally factored in, they would keep diluting the chili extract down by a factor of 10 until people can't taste it anymore.
I'm not sure that was significantly hotter than the previous one.
I think when we get to, that's the point where it'll get hot.
So it's a question for me.
So in your last question, you alluded to the fact that we run Penteract as a punk rock press. Do you want to just elaborate a bit more on what that might mean for people who either don't really know the scene or don't know how it can link to poetry?
It's difficult to define exactly what the punk rock ethic is because you get all sorts of attitudes within the punk community. But you could generalise and say it has an anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment aspect to it, and a pro-freedom, pro-individualism. And I think those are values that are important to both of us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't accept external funding for the press. We contemplated it a few years ago, but it doesn't feel right. I think we want to be completely in charge of what we do without feeling like we're under pressure to conform to other people's standards. We have our own clear vision. We don't clamour for mainstream media attention or poetry prizes or that sort of bullshit. What you might call the poetry establishment has kind of made up its own mind on what it likes and what it wants to promote. So I think let's leave them to it and we can do our own thing. We can have our own scene. And so I think it's quite nice to keep a distance from that establishment. And the big journals, it's not my kind of poetry. I can't relate to it. And it's a shame that a lot of, not everyone, but a lot of the bigger journals are very interested in this narrow view of what poetry can be. But there it is. And that's how these things work. I mean, I'll say as well that whenever I accidentally end up reading something published in one of the big journals, the poetry is often bad. And I mean objectively bad. As in, you can see what they're trying to achieve on the technical level, and you can see how they failed to achieve that. Again, you can tell, maybe this is all about an industry run by certain cliques, by a small number of cliques. And I'm not having a go at that too much, because that's how any industry is run. I'm sure in the food industry too, it's run by a few certain cliques. And people who are in those cliques are probably there by chance a lot of the time.
Yep.
And that's just the way any industry works. So I'm not saying that poetry is any worse than any other industry. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I don't think it's a bad thing, because, like I say, leave them to it. The most important thing is that we are able to find our own community and leave the people who like that poetry to do whatever they want, and then we'll do whatever we want as well. That seems like a pretty good compromise, so long as we are able to do what we want. And if we find we're not able to do what we want, perhaps we don't blame the establishment, perhaps we have a look at what we're doing wrong and take a good look at our scene. Because, again, talking about punk rock record labels, which we know a lot about what went on in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Of course, there have been some punk rock record labels that have, against the odds, managed to get huge and just as big as some mainstream labels. But for most of them, they don't, and they get by through cooperation between the artists and the labels. So you hear stories about bands having to go into the office of their record label to help package up sales, things like that. So everybody chipping in and working together, and the band and the label seeing themselves as a partnership.
One vision, one.
Yeah, well, it's a scene.
Goal.
That's what a scene is, and it's been over the last year or so. It's been quite disappointing to see what's happened in our corner of the poetry world. The number of presses that have unfortunately had to shut down because the sales aren't there. And several of these we saw not too infrequently posting tweets and other posts on other social media along the lines of, if you're a poet we've published, please could you help us out and try to promote your book? And then only rarely would that actually happen. And this is a problem. I mean, I did my own tweet, or we did through Penteract, our own tweet about, hey, if someone's published you, please try to promote your own stuff.
Mm.
I wasn't quite as gentle as some of the other publishers have been. Well, I'll tell you what happened. As I said, we'd seen friends of ours had to close their presses, and there are many reasons for that. But one would be that they feel like they're not getting the support from their poets that they should be. We've actually been quite lucky. We've published people who are very good at promoting their work. In general, I think that's true to say.
Yeah, yep.
But I saw all of this, and then I saw a tweet from someone who we don't know very well, from a press we don't know very well, but it came up in our feed. And they just had their book published, and their publisher had done a tweet saying, out now, this book. And they quote tweeted it saying, my new book's out today. So happy. Don't worry, you don't have to buy it. I'm just happy it's out in the world.
Oh, God, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so that annoyed me a bit. So my tweet said something along the lines of, if you're a poet who has no interest in promoting their own work, please don't submit your work to a poetry press, just self-publish. Which is, and I think I added, which is a perfectly legitimate way to do things, which I believe, because I'm a punk rocker. Self-publishing is important. DIY, yeah, make it yourself. Make it yourself and put it out into the world yourself. Take the risk yourself. That's it, take the risk yourself. That's important too. I mean, that's what you do as a punk anyway. And I mean, I think most people appreciated that. But a couple of people there were some replies that I had to consider, not for very long, so I think they were very good. One person, and they did that sort of pile-on thing where they tried to shame us for even suggesting that poets have to promote their own work.
Yes.
And they said, we can't self-publish because if a book is self-published, you can't apply for funding and you can't send it to prizes. And that's more important than any number of sales. which I thought was, well, selfish, to say the least. Because it's saying that in the first instance, you want a publisher to publish your book, pay for it, design it, work hours on it,
Yep.
spend their money on it. You don't care if that sells. You're not going to help to sell that book. But you are going to use it to try and bleed money from somebody else.
You're going to use it to leverage your position. Yeah.
So first of all, it seems selfish. It also seemed very against the artist's mission. Because to me, and maybe this is a punk thing, but I think it's bigger than that. I think most artists would say you want to get your book into as many hands as possible because you want people to read what you've said. I can't understand the mentality of someone who is happy with only 5 people reading their book so long as they can get some funding from a faceless governing body.
No, I think that's right. It does sort of fly in the face of what it means to be an artist, and I think that's very much how we both felt, wasn't it? That being published, you should be proud and you should be pushing your book and not just using it. If you're proud of it, you should want sales. If it's worthy of a prize, well, and that's what you want, so be it. But it shouldn't be at the detriment of actually trying to garner sales and helping your press, most of whom are not making a lot of money out of this. They're doing it and may even be losing money, and they're doing it as a labour of love.
Yeah, and it's short-sighted too, because the more you boost the press, the more the press is able to boost you.
Mm.
And to find other people to boost other members of the scene. And to really build something. But if people keep being selfish like this, it's just not going to happen. And I don't know what these poets are going to do when all the presses who might have published them have had to shut down.
And then they're just left with the big journals and the big presses that, as we talked about earlier, are not interested in publishing very much alternative stuff.
Exactly. I mean, I don't want to be too negative, but that's why I think the punk attitude works best. I think, you have that sense of being in the scene, looking out for each other. The press looks out for the poet looks out for the press. That seems pretty good to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take a sip of this, I can't remember its name. Lassie, like the dog.
Lassi. Again, apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation. Okay, ready for the next wing?
Yep.
Okay, number 4 is Los Calientes Barbacoa, 33,000 Scoville Heat Units, a smoky maple wood, red jalapeno, and dried chipotle pepper.
Okay.
Ooh, that is smoky.
It's tasty.
Nice balance of sweet and smoky.
It's not hot though.
No, I actually thought it was less hot than the last one.
So a question for you.
Okay.
What about the food industry might surprise people? What might they not know that they should?
That's a good question. I'm going to think back to my early days when I first started out, I think, and what surprised me. And the first one I remember, my very quick realisation is actually how much effort goes into keeping food safe. And one of the first things that really surprised me was going into a factory and seeing that they had metal detectors on every production line. And then I thought about it for a second and it made complete sense. So basically, most of the food or drink you eat or consume will have gone through a metal detector or an X-ray or a filter or a sieve. And it makes complete sense when you think about it for just a second. You think a lot of food production facilities, most things are made of stainless steel. There's lots of enclosed systems, so you can't see what's going on if something's fallen off. A lot of things use knives or blades, and with the best will in the world, things break. So actually, it made complete sense, but it surprised me. And I think the other one, again, my very first job interview, I went for a meat processing facility. And I knew about the farming side of things. I'd grown up around farms, I'd worked on farms, and one of the things was a tour of an abattoir. And don't worry, I'm not going to get too graphic here, but I went to the interview thinking, right, either I'm going to leave here a vegan or I'm going to be perfectly fine with what I see. And I'll be honest, I went in there and I came out feeling very reassured, as I'm sure everyone can gather by the fact we're sitting around here eating chicken wings rather than vegan alternatives. But they were two things that surprised me, just how much effort goes into keeping people safe. And don't believe all the horror stories you hear on the news. People do take a lot of care. Certainly in the UK, I can't speak for other countries, but certainly in the UK, people take a lot of care of their stock at every point of their journey.
Yeah, well, we're both animal lovers, aren't we? And we wouldn't like the thought of any animal suffering. We've kind of thought about not being vegetarian, but we've thought about looking at different areas of the industry and thinking, well, is that bit too cruel? Maybe we shouldn't eat that. So there are some things where we've considered this.
We try and make the ethical choice as much as possible, though, I think, and that's the thing. I mean, we're lucky in the UK. Most of our beef is pasture reared. We can get hold of free range chicken. There's pastured systems. There's a lot of options for free range and higher welfare things. So
yeah, I've just thought of another good thing about the punk scene. It welcomes vegans and extreme carnivores alike. And they all get on when they're together. I'm just being very romantic about the punk scene. It welcomes straight edge teetotalers and the absolute worst kind of druggies you'll ever meet. And I don't mean me. Okay.
So this one's a little different. So you might want to I don't know whether you want to grab a napkin for this, because this one is actually a spiced oil. It's from Fly By Jing, Sichuan Gold. So this is from China. And it's got Sichuan peppers and chili. Probably going to be really good for making stir fries after we've finished with this. But yeah, it's a chili oil, which I thought was quite intriguing. Oh, and 46,000 Scoville units.
Yeah, it's very oily.
That would make a really good fried rice.
Yeah, tastes good. It is spicier than the last one. I don't know, nothing's been hot so far. So we're halfway through. And so far I'm not impressed by the heat. And I'm not being macho. This isn't toxic masculinity. I'm not impressed. But I am impressed with the flavours. I'm actually surprised that they've all been really tasty.
Yeah, I think so. You can see how they might have different purposes. But yeah, I'm not... We do quite like spicy food, but I'm not struggling yet. And I think it's interesting to see, because the UK doesn't really have a hot sauce scene the way the US does. And I don't know about other countries, but so far nothing too challenging. But glancing down the list, I'm seeing a few of the bigger hitter chilies coming into play yet that perhaps we haven't tried before.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're up for the next question then.
Yes.
So going back to what you said about the punk rock scene being a community and helping each other, and maybe feeling that the poetry community doesn't do that so much, how do you think the poetry community could become more like the punk community and poet and press work together?
Well, I think the poetry community does support it. We do support each other quite a lot. So I wouldn't say we're that bad at it, but I get frustrated because I can see ways where it might improve. I think, and this is a difficult thing, because if I use a word like branding and developing your brand, those sort of terms, a lot of people just think this is horrible businessy marketing talk, and it kind of is, and I don't like it, but we've got to be realistic here. We are trying to promote something, and the poets are trying to promote something, or they should be, so you do have to think about these concepts. And I think it's important to think about your brand. So as a poet, one way you can help is by saying, hey everyone, buy my book. But another way you can help is to improve your brand. And that could be by sharing your poetry online. I mean, that's what I do. I tweet poems. I don't send my poems to journals, but if you see me in the journal, it's because someone's seen the poem of mine on Twitter and said, hey, can I publish this? But if you don't want to post your poems on Twitter, then you could get your poems in journals. There are lots of ways to do this. You don't even have to involve poems. You could just discuss poetry on social media. You could discuss anything, discuss your cat, whatever. Just find a way to build your profile so that you're improving your brand. And when I say brand in this sense, I mean your authentic brand, not a created brand, not a persona. You know, what else do you do? Do you paint? Do you go bowling? You know, whatever. There are two ways that people buy books from small presses. When I say small presses, I'm talking about presses the size of Penteract, because there are big small presses as well. Really, there are only two ways people buy books from a press like Penteract and all the many presses like us. Either they like the poet, so they buy the book because they like the poet, or they see a press like us and they know they can trust us and they respect us and they trust our judgment, and they buy books because they think we're going to be giving them something good. So this isn't just about what poets can do. I mean, poets should be trying to improve their brand, but presses like us should be making more of an effort too to improve our brand. And again, that's not just through showing poems or showing book covers. It's through engaging with people. It's through like our Twitter polls that we've done for the last year. That's gained a lot of engagement, and people, I think, have really appreciated it. Some people haven't, but that's going to happen, isn't it? You're going to have to get into some fights with people if you're at all trying to start a conversation.
Yeah.
You can't expect everyone to agree with you.
And I suppose people have got to realise as well that actually wanting to sell books, going back to the punk rock analogy, is not punk rock. Punk rock record labels still need to sell albums, they need to sell gig tickets, they need to sell merch. The bands do. There's a difference between selling stuff to keep something going and putting back into the community, and a difference between outright capitalism. You need to be able to sell things to keep going. We don't get any funding, as we said earlier, so we rely on ourselves and our poets to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, the marketplace is not identical to modern capitalism.
Some people have accused us of that, though.
Yeah, but people are idiots. I mean, it's trying to sell a product does not automatically make you a capitalist. You actually have to sell things in order to get art out into the world, which is what we want to do. We don't care about money. How much money do people think we're making? We care about getting books in hands, eyes on pages. You know, we want people to be reading the poetry we believe should be read. And in order to do that, you're going to have to act like a business. It's essential. There's no other way around this. I mean, you could give everything away for free, which we also encourage. You know, put PDFs up online, tweet all your work. But the community will ultimately benefit if people are buying books, because I would say not all, but nearly all the money we make goes right back into the scene. You do have to sell books, both in order to get people reading and in order to support further future projects. So that's one thing. Those are the things we could actively do. We could build our brands. Both poet and press could build their brands and work together to support each other's brands. And I'm sorry for using the word brands. Another thing we could do is and this is again in the punk rock spirit, the spirit of freedom and individualism, we could stop constantly trying to limit poets. One thing presses could do is get rid of the ridiculous restriction on publishing on social media.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention that when you were just talking. It seems ridiculously unfair.
Yeah, so the idea that if you post something on Twitter, for example, or Facebook, that counts as published. So therefore you can't submit it to journals that say no previously published material. And it's crazy. I mean, I can't imagine that at all harms these journals if someone were to do that. But it definitely does harm the poets, as I say, with trying to build their own brand. If they feel like they can't post their work online, that's not going to help at all. And it harms publishers like us, because we want our poets to be able to freely show the world who they are, so we can say, look how great this person is.
I think it shows a lack of foresight from the journals and presses that put these rules out as well, because if they had any kind of understanding of social media, they'd know it's less than the old phrase is the 24-hour news cycle. It's not even that anymore, is it? The poem is there for an instant and it's gone. But the few people who saw it might become a fan of that poet and might seek them out.
Exactly. So that's one limiting, and then there are other limits, like the idea that there are certain things you shouldn't write about, or certain things you should write about. That I've seen people say that poets have a responsibility to discuss X, Y, Z, whatever. And I always just think, well, I want to be irresponsible, please. Being irresponsible is so much more fun. And that's what we're in it for, isn't it? Aren't we poets because we find poetry fun? There's also a lot of limiting these days on formats, where you should post your poetry. People saying you shouldn't post poetry on Twitter, especially after Musk took over, as if that's how he's really profiting. And NFTs are another thing. I mean, the stick that the NFT crowd gets. You know, I'm not making NFTs. I'm in two minds about the whole thing, but I certainly think that any artist, any creative person who sees a new medium and thinks, what can I do with this new medium, should not be attacked for doing that.
Yeah, it seems very, again, backwards looking, not forward thinking, not wanting to embrace new media and explore it. You don't have to. Nobody said when the word processor came out, right, you must throw out your typewriter and use this. You must not use a pen and paper. You should use a tablet to make your notes. So it seems strange that it goes the other way.
Yeah. But again, so anyway, let's end with the positive. There was a bit of moaning in that. So there are people doing things like NFTs. There's the whole NFT crowd who are great attitude towards art. There are lots of poets we work with who are doing all the things we're talking about here. So it's not that nobody's doing this. I mean, there are lots of great poets who've got the absolute right attitude, a punk rock attitude, I would say, even if they don't know that they have a punk rock attitude. And in many ways, things are looking really good. I think sales have been across the board really in poetry. Sales have taken a hit over the last 18 months, and it's understandable why. Tough times. But creativity is improving. I'm seeing so much better stuff in constrained poetry and formal poetry, and of course visual poetry, and part of that is the NFT crowd. So all areas of formalism are actually improving, and I'm seeing much better stuff. So things are really looking up, and I'm extremely excited about what's in our future. There we are. I'm being positive. I can do it. I can be positive.
On that note then, Wing.
Yeah.
Number 6 is from Chile Lengua de Fuego from Honduras. This is Turmeric Bomb. 69,000 Scoville units. So it's got turmeric, ginger, Scotch bonnet, and jalapeno. And now this is where we start to get into the scarier chilies. A chocolate ghost, which I don't think we've tried before, and is one of these new chili varietals that are coming out.
Chocolate ghost.
Chocolate ghost.
Is there chocolate in it?
No, but there's an authentic.
Is there a ghost in it?
There's an authentic Honduran spirit called. Aguardiente. Okay, should we go for it?
Yep.
It looks a bit of an evil colour, I've got to say. It's a bit scary looking. Smells very fruity, smells very Scotch bonnet.
Again, that's really tasty. These have all been really good.
Oh, that is quite hot though. That builds on your tongue. But it's somehow creamy at the same time.
This isn't too different from what you're used to doing. You do a lot of taste panels.
Mm-hmm.
So it's new for me, but not for you. But you've never done a spicy food panel. I suppose it'd be weird if in your work you had to go up the Scoville scale.
No, not to this level, but I have done it when I've worked in meat. We've done spicy and coated things before now, so that's an important part. So taste panels, there's a couple of different ways around it. Sometimes you're just checking to make sure the product is as you expect. It delivers the taste profile. There's no weird taints, or there's enough or not too much of the seasoning that's gone in. And part of that, you've got to be really careful how you stage them, because you can't go with the spiciest thing first because it just blasts your palate. So I'm used to arranging things in order of the strength of the flavour. So be that spice or like barbecue, sweet and sour. So I have done that before, but this has been probably one of the more enjoyable ones I've done for quite a while.
I'm enjoying it. They're really nice. All of them. Okay, so you're used to these panels, and sometimes spicy panels. But we have a lot of spicy food anyway, don't we? You make a lot of curries. I eat a lot of curries.
Yeah, Mexican food as well. And,
Mexican food?
Well, just food from all over that's spicy, really. I like to try the different flavours.
Well, tell me a spicy story.
I don't know if you'll remember this, but early on in the pandemic, during the first lockdown, I got really into trying to replicate what they call British Indian restaurant style curries, because we couldn't get a takeaway. So these are the, traditional, well, I say traditional, I'm using air quotes here, anglicised versions of Indian food that you can get all over the UK. And one of the ones I remember making early on was a fal. This is one of the spicier curries on the repertoire. It goes up, chicken tikka masala, balti, something like a madras or a patia or a dansak, then vindaloo, then you have fal. So I thought I'd make a really spicy curry. I think I'd actually managed to get hold of some Komodo dragon chilies to go with the traditional very hot chilies that go into it. And I'd started making it. You start on day one and it was marinating, and I'd ordered, our food shopping was meant to come the next day. And one of the things I'd ordered, because we'd run out of it, was basmati rice. And they didn't have any basmati rice. This was early on in the pandemic. There were lots of shortages of food staples. So the only carbohydrate I had to hand was lasagna sheets. I don't know if you can remember this. So I had a pot of chicken fal that was marinating that I had to cook because I didn't want it to go to waste. So I ended up creating a fal lasagna.
I remember it. I loved it.
And I, instead of using a traditional bechamel sauce, I made a sort of yogurt-based sauce to go with it and be a bit more Indian. But I just remember that being really bloody hot because there was nowhere to hide. Because if you have a curry, you've got your rice, you've got your naan, and you can have the curry sauce and the rice separate. But when you cook a lasagna, of course, everything's all in there. And I just remember that being ridiculously spicy. Do you remember?
Yeah, and it was nice. I prefer it, Fuck rice. Lasagna beats rice every time.
But yeah, that's where I had to think outside the box. So I think I'm glad my food recipe development skills came in, and there's probably a bunch of Indian restaurateurs and a bunch of Italian people really mad at me right now, but I didn't want it to go to waste.
I loved it. Okay, are we ready for the next one?
So, number 6 wasn't too challenging. We're into the danger zone now, I would say. So this is Karma sauce, and just reading the label, I found really interesting. I found out the founder worked on the James Webb Telescope. But this is Cosmic Disco, and this is the first one to break the 100,000 Scoville unit level. 103,000. So red jalapenos and scorpion peppers, which is another one of these more modern spicy peppers, with soy and citrus notes.
Okay. So it says that the founder worked on the James Webb Telescope, but it doesn't explain any further how the founder of a hot wing sauce was involved in that.
No, but it does have a rather funky holographic label with a disco dancing alien on it.
Okay, I like.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
It's definitely got a kick to it. You've just inhaled that.
I like it. That's really tasty.
Really umami led, but with a nice sweetness. Definitely getting hotter.
Yeah, that's the level of heat I like.
Ooh.
Which means that we've got 3 more. Mm-hmm. It might start to get uncomfortable. That's the first hot one, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, you can tell that's hot. I'm going to have some milk. It's the first time I've sipped milk because of the heat. I'm going to have some tequila too. Not because of the heat.
So, we've talked about what's going on right now, but can you tell me what's coming up, both for you and also for the press?
I mentioned a CD coming out in September, punk rock featuring palindromes. Who wouldn't love that? I mentioned the manuscript that I've neglected for 6 months. I want to get back into that. And I'm going to be recording a lot of readings. It's something I've been meaning to do for a while. And I'm going to record almost every poem I've ever written. My lips are burning a bit. It's harder to talk now.
Yep.
So that was a step up from the other ones, wasn't it? You could tell that's a step up. Anyway, so I'm going to record a lot of readings of poems. It's something I've been meaning to do for a long time, but I'm just going to throw myself into it and do that. So I'll probably do that after hay fever season, so I sound better. And perhaps next year I will finally get round to offering some lessons, poetry lessons, teaching people about things like acephalous catalexis.
Easy for you to say.
I have a poem that has a lovely joke, and I tweeted it yesterday. It has a little Easter egg joke, but you have to know what acephalous catalexis is in order to get the joke. And I'm concerned that not enough people do, so I'm going to have to start teaching people.
Do you want to start now?
No. I'll let people Google it and then figure out which poem of mine I'm talking about. So that's what's going on with me. Maybe offering some lessons, definitely doing some readings and recording them and putting them online. Finishing my manuscript that I've neglected for a while and putting out this CD, and then just more music. I want to make more of these punk rock experimental pieces. And then for the press, we are going to cut back in terms of our outputs. As I said earlier, we've published 6 books this year already. We're going to do another 3, 4, maybe even 5. Next year I want to halve that. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be working hard on the press. It means we'll be working on other things for the press. We'll be trying to really make this scene what it should be and as big as it should be. And we've got ideas, and they're good ideas. So trust us. And I'm going to blow my nose, but I'm not going to leave it in the final edit, so people don't have to hear that.
Right, then I'm going to do mine too then.
Okay, we've just blown our noses. I got chili in my nose, and Clara's nose bled. So that's good. But I tell you what, when you watch the show, there's always this danger when they start touching their eyes because their eyes are watering. I don't know about your eyes, but mine are fine.
I'm doing surprisingly okay considering I'm also suffering from hay fever, which, to be fair, is probably why my nose is bleeding a bit, not anything to do with the hot sauce, I hope, and my brain is not bleeding. But it's not been that bad yet. But here is the next sauce. So anyone who's familiar with the show will know that number 8 is De Bomb.
Oh, fuck, it's this one.
But we got something a bit different here because we have De Bomb Evolution. So on the show, they use a sauce that contains pepper extract that the company we ordered the sauces through will not use. That is basically the stuff they use in pepper spray. But they want to use only natural extracts, things that you have to go through a process to get the extract for pepper spray. And this company won't do that. It'll only use natural methods of extracting and concentrating peppers. So this is De Bomb Evolution. It's an equivalent Scoville scale on 135,500. And it's powerful and tastes good. So
135,600.
Yeah.
That's pretty high.
Gentleman first. Anthony's gone straight in there with a big bite. I'm going to be a bit more cautious. Okay, it's very savoury. I think it's going to build.
Hit the back of the throat quite hard.
Oh, yeah.
My upper lip seems to be taking the worst of this. It's suffering. That must be the way I eat. So the last time you were on the podcast, last time we did this was the season finale of season 1, or series 1. And I vaguely remember we talked about your idea of whether you're an illustrator or a visual poet. And you mentioned imposter syndrome and things like that. Let's not go into that again, but where do you stand now in terms of how you view yourself artistically? Are you a poet or are you a visual artist? Are you an illustrator? What's your best description?
It's tricky because I know I've struggled quite a bit with creativity lately. I get maybe still struggling with trying to decide what my identity is in that field. And if I'm being honest, I think I see myself more now as a visual artist and an illustrator than a poet. Sometimes I play with words and incorporate them into my work, but I'm far more likely to read a piece of work and see something I want to draw, if that makes sense. Kind of hard to exhale, it hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel that trying to wrench in the visual poetry aspects, for me, feels like it saps something away from other aspects of my creativity.
But you're thinking about NFTs. Probably, we both discussed them. We both have some reservations. We both are intrigued by it in various ways. I think it's fair to say you're more into the idea of getting involved. And we've talked about collaborating on things, and we've got some interesting ideas. So it's interesting to me that you would have this identity crisis about whether you're an illustrator or a visual poet, and yet also be quite willing to jump into something very new.
I think it comes about because we were looking at it a while ago, and I'm just intrigued by it. And I think certainly with the conversations we've had with people, and it just feels like a nice community that's experimental and collaborative and wants to look into something new. And I quite like that idea because my own practice, I do fuse old and new equally. So I think it'd be quite interesting to see how that would play, how you blend old media and new media and now ultra new media. In creating something, if that makes sense.
And a couple of our favourite punk bands have made NFTs, so if the punks are doing it,
yeah,
it's fine. Maybe we'll do it, but let's see what happens. Oh, I've got to remember how to think.
Next wing, we get a leap up of 500,000 Scoville units here. So bear in mind we started in the thousands. We're now at... So De Bomb was 135,600. This next one clocks in at 642,000.
Oh, that's a lot.
It is somewhat ominously made by the Pucker Butt Pepper Company, and it is called Unique Garlic.
Right.
Super savoury garlic mixes and super hot chilies, including the Carolina Reaper, Scorpion, and 7-Pot Primo. These are very scary.
The Carolina Reaper is the terrifying one, yes.
I think 7-Pot Primo might be hotter, but not verified yet. And, will kill vampires and humans. And you've just not even thought about it and just eaten the whole thing in pretty much one go. You don't have to eat the whole wing, you know. It smells spicy. I haven't even eaten it yet.
I tell you why I'm eating them quickly. If you eat it quickly, you get to savour all the flavours before the heat suddenly kicks in and kills you. That wasn't as spicy as the last one.
Sure it's not going to build?
It might. It's not as harsh, is it?
I don't think so. It's weird. And I know it's not that we've just killed us. But for anyone saying, well, have you just killed your taste buds? I can tell you, no, it's not just that. It is different. It just hits different.
Okay, we're nearly there.
So, before we go into the last wing, here we are at the end of... Did we decide on season or series?
I think both are good.
Season is 2 of the Penteract podcast with the last wing before we go insane with chili fever what do you think the future of the podcast is?
Well, we did this at the end of the first series, / season, and I said I wanted to go beyond poetry, but still include a bit of poetry for the second series. And I think we did that pretty well. Well, I also noticed that the second series is largely veered towards discussions about wordplay, puzzles, and that whole wordplay community, while still staying true to being a poetry podcast. And that wasn't intentional. That's just kind of developed. We did start the first episode with Ben Zimmer and Eric Chaikin from Beyond Wordplay, so maybe that set the precedent for it. Even though it wasn't planned, it feels like Series 2 was the wordplay series. So, on the one hand, I don't know what's going to happen, because just like that happened organically, whatever Season 3 is going to be like is going to happen organically. If I could choose, I would like to discuss music more, I think. Conversations about music, more interviews with musicians. Another thing I've thought is that maybe I need to go for shorter episodes. The interview I did with Anthony Horowitz, which is the shortest episode we've done, wasn't short by design. It was short because I got on the call with Anthony and he said, I've got half an hour. For some reason, I'm so stupid I hadn't told him that I normally like these to be an hour to 2 hours. But he was gracious enough to say, okay, well, let's try and find some compromise. So we got 45 minutes. And if you look at the episode, it's about 42 minutes long. I mean, there's not much taken out. We just went straight into it. Quick fire, question after question. And that was quite appealing. And I think that's quite a good length and a good way of doing it. Just get the questions down, get a quick conversation going. Something that's easy to edit. Maybe that's why I like it. Maybe I like the ones that are easy to edit.
Unlike this one.
Unlike this one, where I'm going to have to take out so much sniffing. But there will be a Series 3, Season 3, because I love doing these. Another thing I might do is more stuff like this, more themed, stupid, crazy episodes. Why not?
Okay. So on that note...
So on the show, there's this, what they call it, the tradition, don't they?
The last dab. So, should I introduce the pepper first and then...
And explain the last dab and what goes on.
So we're on the last... the sauce is actually called the last dab. It says here, Scoville Units to be announced. And this is the last...
The understanding is that it's in the millions.
It's around 1.5 to 2 million Scoville units, which is yet to be verified, but it's made from the Apollo pepper, powdered and pure chili distillate. And the tradition is the wings are already coated in the sauce. The tradition is to then add an additional dab of sauce before finishing the episode. You don't have to. And I'm still not sure whether I'm gonna. I guess I gotta. And I'm just gonna warn Anthony, this sauce is actually quite fluid.
Okay, so don't just drench it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God. See you on the other side.
Okay, here we go.
And again, I was a bit wimpier. I've had a few nibbles of the meatier bits, and Anthony has just gone to town on it.
It's nice. I thought the De Bombe was worse. Actually, what was one before De Bombe? When we had that leap up.
The Cosmic Disco.
That was quite hot too. It's the leap up. Oh, hang on. Here comes the heat.
Yeah. Let the air go over your... It's activated by water and air, so let the...
It's okay. I'm not sweating.
No.
My eyes aren't watering. My mouth is feeling that typical sting. That's about it.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I wouldn't want to eat a whole plate of them, but I'm surprised my nose isn't really that runny, and I'm not really that sweaty. Where it seems like it's that hot sauce thing. It sort of delivers the heat differently to, say, like a curry.
I would say they were all tasty, so I don't regret any of them.
So, how do we end this?
I think we just end it. We've said what we're doing next series, and about the press and everything, and we've had fun, haven't we?
Yeah, this has been interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I think end podcast now. End. Here's the theme music.